But there must be instances where you've met someone and you've tried to help them and you've been unsuccessful.
Of course.
Why does it not work sometimes?
No new information can enter the nervous system that is not equal to the emotion the person is experiencing.
Check one, check.
I've seen thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of testimonials of people saying, Joe Dispenza changed my life. I mean, I've got one at home, right? I've got a testimonial that I live with.
I'm sorry.
No, honestly, I love it because she's probably back there somewhere, but she's so passionate and inquisitive and curious that I almost vicariously am benefiting from the work and research she's doing. And she's bringing things into our relationship and life that are making it more rich and full. And I have a certain perspective, which I wouldn't naturally go into that world. And even with breath work and the other things that she's brought into our relationship, I wouldn't have naturally gone there. So it's super useful. But there must be instances where you've met someone and you've tried to help them and you've been unsuccessful.
Of course.
And why don't those people change? Because I'm assuming that you think most people can change. They have the propensity to change. Why does it not work sometimes?
And scientists ask me this, we talk about this all the time. Sometimes being in such severe lack and desperation, creates a state where you can't hear anything. Because no new information can enter the nervous system that is not equal to the emotion the person is experiencing. Just as a broad understanding, this is why we don't do questions at our events, because you can give the person the answer to the question that they're asking you, and they will not hear you. They will not hear you. In fact, they will argue against you. But if you get that person out of that emotional state, and the only person that's going to do that is them, by the way, get that person out of their emotional state, they can hear that information. So sometimes we're programmed into such lack, we're programmed, right, to wait for something out there to change, to take away this emptiness or lack. When this happens, I'll feel this, And so when things are good in our life, we feel good. And when things aren't so good in our life, we feel bad. So we're kind of victimized to the circumstances in our life. Our outer world is controlling our inner world of thoughts and feelings. So if the person has been programmed into saying, why haven't I healed? Or why hasn't this happened in my life? Because the person who's saying, why haven't I healed, is the old self. The new self would never say that, right? The new self is too busy overcoming and becoming, right? So I think people meet information at their own level. But what I can tell you that is so compelling and so exciting is that when we get people on the stage, and it happens every event. It's really quite unbelievable to see a person stand on the stage in front of 2,300 people. You would walk right past her in the grocery store. She doesn't look vegan. She doesn't look ketogenic. She doesn't look particularly fit or young or dressed well, whatever that is. She just looks like a normal person. And they stand on the stage and they tell their story of how they were diagnosed with cancer or whatever the condition is, and what they did in their life to change those health conditions. And there's numerous health conditions. When I look out in the audience and I look at people, there isn't a soul in the audience that isn't leaning in. Everybody is leaning in because there's the example of truth on the stage. And there's nothing like a good story, right? So the change that we're seeing in our community is that there's a greater acceptance, a greater belief, a greater understanding, a greater awareness to the idea that you could actually heal because people witness it. And the person in the audience who's seeing that person who healed themselves from whatever health condition it is relates to them. And they say, my God, if that person can do it, I can do it as well. And just like an infection spreads amongst a culture and creates disease, health and wellness can become as infectious as disease, right? And so it's not uncommon. Like when that person stands on the stage and they're the 4-minute mile. If the person has Raynaud's syndrome, we've had events where 4 other people with Raynaud's syndrome healed at the end of the event, like no longer have any symptoms at all. Or we've had 5 people in one event step out of a wheelchair. Now, if you asked me if I ever thought that was possible, I would say no.
That is so compelling and so, I don't know if compelling is even the right word. You just can't fathom that. 5 people.
It's pretty unbelievable. But do you not think that it goes back to the placebo effect? If you can heal from Raynaud's syndrome, so can I. I'm telling you that I did, so I'm putting the thought into your head that you can as well.
Well, yeah, but that can be a little bit blind too, right?
We don't need to put this in if you don't want to.
Why?
Go ahead. That can be a little bit blind.
Why would you say that?
That could be a little bit blind in what respect?
Well, just because I'm telling you that, like, if a doctor tells you you have XYZ problems,
3 months to live.
Yeah, you're going to be, fear is going to kick in, and you're going to respond to that just from fear because the doctor's always right.
And you're pacing yourself for that 3 months.
Yeah, but if Joe Blow comes, if Joe Blow comes along and says, you've got 3 months to live, you're going to go, yeah, who are you? Mm-hmm. Right?
But it's positive mindset too.
Just hang on a second, let me interrupt. But the placebo works only if the community works. If that makes any sense. So, because I've got a certificate on the wall, that's my community, right? So you'll believe the certificate more so than just a friend telling you.
But the placebo, I can tell you you're sick and you believe you're sick, whether you're sick or not. I can give you sugar pills,
right,
and you actually think you're taking...
Right, but I'm going to ask for your credentials, and you don't have any. Right? You don't have any because that's the certificate. So that placebo is believed by that certificate just because the certificate is there.
But that's what I'm
Right.
saying. So if I'm a doctor and I tell you you have cancer and you have 3 months to live, you're going to set your pace for 3 more months to live. That's it. Ta-da, the end.
Right.
You believe that you are going to be dead in 3 months.
Right.
No different than if you have Parkinson's, or just say, and I don't know a lot about Parkinson's, but I'm giving you medication for Parkinson's because it's going to help you. You believe that it's helping you, even though it's just sugar pills.
Right. But that's just from a doctor's perspective, right?
I'm reading the placebo effect book right now, and
Yeah.
there have been numerous studies in groups where 10 people have the same illness. 5 of them are given a placebo, and 5 of them are given a medication. And
Right.
there's no difference in the healing rate of the medication versus the placebo.
Right.
Because the people that have the placebo
Yes.
are actually curing themselves, and they believe that the medication that they're taking is curing them.
They do, but more to Joe's point here, Stephen asked him, why doesn't it work with some people? That was the original question, right?
Okay.
So you're talking about a placebo of a medical community giving saline to a certain group and actual medication to another group. It's administered by that medical community, the certificate, right?
And what I'm saying is drawing a line to a similarity.
Yeah.
If you're in a wheelchair and I'm in a wheelchair and I see that you can get out of your wheelchair after a period of 3 days,
Right.
I'm going to believe I can as well. And it's a placebo.
Well, it is. The term placebo works, but it only works from the medical community, which is why he's asking him the question. Right? Do you see that correlation there? Because Dr. Joe Dispenza is not a medical doctor. I mean,
Correct.
He's a chiropractor, right?
But
So
it's all about the mindset and it's all about the belief.
it's about the community.
right.
So his community of 2,300 people,
Only at that one event.
only at that one event. So why does it not work for some people? Because the people that go there and don't believe in the system has no effect because they won't allow it to happen.
Correct.
Because they don't have a certificate.
I thought that's what I just said.
I don't think so.
Okay.
So in a controlled environment of a medical community, I mean, I can't give out medication, and I know you can't because you're not licensed to,
Right.
right? Dr. Joe's not licensed to give out medication, and he's not. He's giving out information,
Right.
right? So in his community, 2,300 people buy in or 1,800 buy in to that thing, right? There's a whole level of energy for the placebo effect to work in that sense.
Gotcha.
So there's 1,800 people that don't care if he doesn't have a certificate on the wall.
Right.
Does that make sense? So that's why he's asking him the question. Why doesn't it work with some people that come to your events? Well, and he's explaining it that you won't allow it in because I'm not a doctor. At least that's my layman's perspective of it.
You have to be open, for sure.
You got to be open, but we're only open if there's a certificate on the wall.
Not necessarily.
100%.
Okay.
No? You're not buying into that?
No. No, okay. So my mom is a breast cancer survivor.
Yeah.
And she lived for probably 30 years after her initial diagnosis of breast cancer, and she did not go the medical route. She went the naturopath route.
Right.
And
She went pseudoscience route.
She decided, and this is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
She decided that breast cancer wasn't going to take
Yeah.
over her body.
Yeah.
And she changed her way of eating. She changed her exercise routine, and she went for pseudoscience. And she never did get breast cancer back. So she had decided, I'm not getting this back.
Right. So she made a change.
Yeah,
within herself.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But that was her choice.
Right. So I think that's what that is. That's what what he's trying to explain here.
Okay.
Because if you're not open to it,
Right.
right. But most people in life are only open to the certificate.
Most people.
Most people.
Okay.
Okay.
So I do think when a person sees that example of truth, their awareness of possibility begins to change. And the evidence then allows the person to increase their own belief in themselves and in possibility.
You used the word earlier on, the word identity. And I've been pondering over the last couple of weeks whether identity is useful, because this is a really trivial example, but I've told myself for a long time I don't like running. And this Christmas I decided that it's probably important for me to take on some of these limiting beliefs I have. So I just started running. And in doing so, in going through the pain of like, oh, my legs hurt, whatever, I had this sort of realization that like, what other areas of my life have I just created a story that is closing in on me? And making my life more narrow and in terms of how I think or like my health or whatever. So for the last couple of weeks, I've really been thinking about this concept of identity, like what it is, why we create one, and how harmful or positive it might be to all of us.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think we're all a work in progress, right? I think it's an uncovering process. So I always tell people you can be anybody you want. You can be any character you want to be in three-dimensional reality, in this kind of virtual reality experience. You get to put on any character. But when it comes time to create, when it comes time to connect, you got to lay down that character. You got to lay down the identity. You got to lay down that person, right? And some people have become so idealized to their identity that they can't be anything else. And so I don't think the identity is bad. I think as long as we're able to lay it down when we create, it's important. And by the same means, if there are aspects of your personality or your identity that is undermining your life in some way, and this happens to so many people we see, even with when they're getting healings, that their blood values get better, and then they get back into their life, and then blood values go back up, and then they get more healings, and their blood values go down, and they go back into their life, and sooner or later, this goes on 4 or 5 times. They say, "Is it me?" Like. Do I have something to do with this? And the answer is always yes. If you want to take this on, you can't take one bite. You got to actually eat the whole thing. So then what aspect of your identity then is limiting you? And what is that story that you're saying to reaffirm it to be the truth? And is it really the truth? And if it's not the truth, then you got to make a decision. And you got to make a decision with such firm intention to change that belief that the amplitude of that choice carries a level of energy that causes your body to respond to your mind. That the choice that you're making in that moment becomes a moment in time that you'll never forget. In other words, you have to say, I knew exactly where I was, what I was doing, what time of day it was when I made up my mind to change. Right? It becomes a long-term memory. And the stronger the emotion you feel when you make that choice, the more you remember the choice, right? And so you can't say, oh, well, I think I'm going to change this kind of part of my identity. And your body's going to say, he's lying. Like, he's not serious. He's going to still make the same choice. When you say this is it, I don't care how long it takes, time. I don't care how I feel, body. I don't care what people think of me or what's going on in my life, environment. I'm going to change. And you come out of your resting state and you make that choice. You're giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. That's what you're doing. And so people who make up their mind to change, they have to come out of their resting state and they have to say, I'm doing this. And that is a strong signal in the field.
So does that mean that if I do want to change and I need that kind of escape velocity from my old self, the why, the reason, must be abundantly clear and incredibly strong? So if I'm making a New Year's resolution, I'm not going to just say, listen, I want this New Year's resolution because I think people will think better of me if I have it. It's got to be so deep in my core, and I've got to be so clear and be able to articulate the reason why this matters to me for it to stand a chance.
Yeah, we call that assigning meaning. So it's so important to assign meaning to the task or the act that we're engaging. And one of the best ways to do that is to hold that vision or the dream of why you're doing it. I want to be healthier. I want to be more fit. I want to be more wealthy. I want to be more free. I want to be more in love, whatever it is. The only thing that's stopping you from being any of those things is just a part of your identity that has to change so that you get there. And nothing's mystical about this. If you said, I want to be wealthy, this is your goal, this is your vision, and here you are in lack, the only way you're going to get wealthy is this person's going to have to change a lot to find that wealth, right? So there's nothing mystical about this. We've all done it at some point in our life where we just made up our mind. And what did we do when we did it? We got very clear, like, okay, let me remind myself what that vision is. I just got to remember, why am I doing this? Okay, so I'm going to have to make a different choice. I'm going to write down those choices I have to make. I'm going to have to start doing different things. Okay, what am I going to do? Let me remind myself what I need to do. Okay, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for this experience. Yeah, I know it might hurt my legs in the beginning or whatever it is. I know it may be a little uncomfortable, but I'm going for this goal. This is my goal. And the more we fascinate about that experience, the more we start feeling the emotion of that future. That's when your body, what we've discovered, is beginning to biologically change because it's starting to feel the emotion of the future ahead of time, right? So that keeps a person on the journey. And then we do something really great. We say, what thoughts do I want to stay away from? Like, I can't say, there's no way I'm going to say I can't feel like it. I mean, if you're truly committed to being healthy, and you're going to exercise, you can never say, I'm too tired.
I think when you make the New Year's resolution, it has to be for you. And so often we make choices that are for other people. And then we're not committed to it, whether it's working out at the gym or changing your lifestyle or losing weight or being fit. We have to own that, and we have to be doing that authentically for ourselves. I can't lose weight for you, or be healthier for my daughter, or be fit with my friends.
Right.
It has to be my choice.
That's right.
And then I'm going to be committed for
Yeah,
it.
but
Committed for it. Committed to it.
The idea of a New Year's resolution is a placebo in itself.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. It's like Christmas. It's like Halloween. It's a holiday. It's, what's your New Year's resolution? Because you must make one, right?
And it lasts till the 2nd of January.
Really, it's just another.
It needs to be a lifestyle change. Not just I'm going to do the next year.
Right.
I'll get fit this year. Next year I'll lose weight. The year after I'm going to travel more.
It begs a good question though, because why is it that we do these things in life and we don't understand them? Right? So just like Joe Dispenza is saying, or what I'm saying, we've never been taught these things, but we've been taught about a New Year's resolution. Oh, you got to get better. You got to lose weight. You're fat. Your pants make your ass look fat. No, your ass makes your pants look fat. You follow what I'm saying?
But the thing is, you're never going to be committed to a goal like that, whether it's joining the gym or going on a diet or changing your lifestyle. You'll never be committed to it,
right?
Unless it's your decision.
Well, it can be your decision.
Nobody can tell you to do that.
Of course not. But we're not set up to even believe that at a minuscule level. We're set up to believe that we're going to fail. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you got to do it for you. I 100% agree with that. But we don't know how, because we've never been taught how. And then we've been taught to fail. We've been taught that we have to be lied to.
And then when we do fail, we feel bad.
Because we
feel like a failure.
Because we can handle the truth.
That's a video in itself. We can't handle the truth, and it's very true.
So I'll go back to what begs the question of, why haven't we been taught these things? We've been taught to respect your elders, go to school, get a good job, go to church if that's your thing, raise a family, all these things. But the one element we've never been taught is how to think about yourself and conduct yourself through life. We've never been taught that.
That's a whole series in itself.
Well, this is kind of the series.
This times 1,000.
It blows my mind. And it's an awakening moment. It frickin' is, man. If you can cure your body and all your perceived conditions that you have, and all your shortcomings and your relationships and all that jazz with your mind?
Well, we all know that the mind is used like a minuscule.
Right. So if you don't use
part of the
if
time.
you don't use most of your mind, well, I'm going to make use of it. Right? I'm going to tell you how to feel. I'm going to mold you to the person and extension of myself. I'm going to manipulate you. And I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, good luck with that.
You can never say, I'm too tired. You could never say, I don't feel like it. That's going to cause you to not make the choice, right? So it's kind of this process where we're kind of doing that exact thing. We're actually looking at the old identity, and we're reminding ourselves of who we want to become, right? And until you become it. And we discovered it's the overcoming process That is the becoming process. When the person overcomes some belief, some behavior, um, some emotion, when they truly overcome it, they naturally become somebody else. It's just a side effect. Their work in doing that makes them love themselves more.
You also have a lot of case studies of, I was reading a lot of them from Army veterans and people that have been through pretty horrific experiences in the Army. I was reading a story of Joshua, who was an Army veteran who I believe came to one of your events and took part in your meditation and described it in his own words as his heart cracked wide open.
Yeah.
What happened with Joshua? Because that's a good example of personal transformation.
Well, we have a program right now in the veterans, the Navy SEALs, Special Ops, simply because there's lots of stories like Joshua, where he was pretty much ready to give up on his life, and many of these veterans, they cope to the best of their ability, but they, in the back of their mind, they have an exit plan. They have the drugs ready. They're thinking about taking their life. Many of them think this way, and they've done so many different types of things to help themselves, and even a lot of them have done plant medicine and mushrooms and ketamine and all kinds of things to help them. But on some level, their PTSD doesn't go away. And Joshua's a great example because he was at the very bottom of the point in his life where he was ready to give up. And, the thing that I like to do with veterans is to reason with them. If you have a Navy SEAL, right, and these are elite individuals, if I tell them exactly what will happen if they practice opening their heart, if I say to them it's going to reset the baseline for trauma in the brain, they don't say, "How do I do it?" They say, "Yes, sir. Like I'm going to do it until it happens." And that's what happens to all of these guys. There's so much trauma in their brain and body. There's so much incoherence in their nervous system. There's so many physical problems that they're having that they're just really out of balance. So if we work with these people and give them all the information and give them numerous opportunities to apply it, so many of them break through, and that's the moment their brain and body literally are no longer connected to the memory or the emotion that keeps them in the past, and they get recalibrated.
And he was a drug addict, an alcoholic, a victim of child abuse.
Yeah.
And the before and after of Joshua.
Dramatic. Yeah, dramatic. Again, we interview a lot of these veterans. We interviewed this. He didn't know anything about meditation. This guy never meditated in his life. He didn't know anything about me. He didn't even know where he was going. This is how blind the study was. And he got there and he was just like, "There's no way, like, I'm going to hang out with all these people." He was really, and always on guard. And they asked him in front of the camera, like, "My goodness, like, what happened?" And he got, this is a guy that looks like a Navy SEAL. And he paused for like a minute. And he got so emotional and he said, I got my life back. I got my life back. I got my marriage is great again. I'm in love with my kids. I can feel again. I'm happy. Like, I'm not faking it. I really feel a change, So that's how the vet program kind of grew, because the veteran program was just a few vets coming that were, again, injured in some way, physically or emotionally, and completely different at the end of the event. They're going to go tell their tribe, like, right away, like, "You got to do this. This really helped me." So we have a strong veteran community, and we have our one of our nonprofits, the Give to Give Foundation, that works with veterans, and we create all kinds of programs for them to heal, and we're super proud of the results we're getting.
When we talk about PTSD, and I've been diagnosed with PTSD from the trauma that I had in such a short period of time, that, like when he talks about people getting into a wheelchair and walking away, that's visual. We can see it. We can see the healing, and it's pretty miraculous. But when you're dealing with healing emotionally, and there's tons of emotional trauma that people have lived through, like he's talking about child abuse and sexual abuse and murders and whatever else. It's emotional trauma that people don't see. If I punch you in the face and you have a black eye, people see that and they know that you're hurt. But people can't see inside. And they don't see the hurt that's inside. So when you're diagnosed with something like PTSD, nobody can see that pain. It's not a wound. There's no scars. There's visible scars, I should say. And when your doctor prescribes pharmaceuticals that completely make you numb, it numbs the pain from the trauma, but it numbs the pain from living a joyful life.
Yeah.
Where you're actually coherent.
That's right.
Because feeling numb is not a way to cure emotional trauma.
No.
In my opinion, it didn't work for me.
Absolutely it isn't, but that's the system we're in, right?
I am dying to go to one of his retreats.
Yeah, hopefully in August.
I didn't know that there was a connection between my brain and my heart.
Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. It's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center, right? It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create.
You talked earlier on about brain-heart coherence. It's a term that I've not heard before. I didn't know that there was a connection between my brain and my heart.
Oh, there's a definite connection between your brain and heart. Yeah. So we were so fascinated. This was February of 2020. I'll never forget it. We started when we were doing our electroencephalograms, our brain studies. We put a cardiac lead from the heart to the machine, and we started looking at HRV in comparison to brain waves. And coherence is rhythm, right? So when waves are kind of moving in rhythm like this, you can see that on the brain scan, right?
Bees.
Yeah, they're very orderly. They're they're rhythmic like that. So if you think of waves that are coherent, being very orderly and being very rhythmic, when they're out of order, like choppy, and they're on different parts of the brain or on different rhythms, that's when the brain's incoherent, right? And so when we started looking at training people how to broaden their awareness to sense space, when you're sensing space, the act of sensing and feeling causes you to stop analyzing and thinking. And if you're not analyzing and thinking, you start suppressing neocortical activity. Your brainwaves start to slow down. In beta, you're aware that you're a body local in space and time. That's low-level beta. Like we're talking right now, we're in low-level beta. If I said, Stephen, I'm going to give you a quiz, and you're going to have to take the quiz in front of your audience, and you would kind of perk up a little bit. Your brain would get a little bit more aroused, and the light bulb would get a little brighter, and you'd move into mid-range beta. That's like when you're going to give a speech, or you're at a dinner and you don't know people. You kind of be a little bit more aware.
Just for people that can't see this, because they might be listening on audio.
So beta is conscious awareness. Now, in beta, the brain is trying to create meaning between what's going on in the outer world and what's going on in the inner world, and it's processing all the sensory information. So a lot of data. So beta is like conscious and awake. And so there's low-level beta, there's mid-range beta. It's not on this chart. But high-level beta is when you're fearful, when you're anxious, when you're angry, when you're in pain, when you're frustrated, when you're jealous, whatever. People get switched on in these high levels of beta, and that's when we get over-focused. You ever been under stress and you start over-focusing? That's because you're narrowing your focus and you're over-focusing, and that's kind of a brain state. And so when you broaden your awareness and you, instead of narrow your focus on something physical or material, that's what the stress hormones do. But if you broaden your awareness and you sense space, and this act of sensing causes you to no longer analyze and think, and your brainwaves start to move into alpha. Now in alpha, which is this brainwave, is a slower brainwave state. That's the creative state of the brain. The brain sees more in pictures, more in images. It's more imaginary, right? In beta, there's a voice talking to you in the back of your head all the time saying, this is right and this is wrong. You got this to do, you got that to do. That's the critic kind of in our brain. When you get beyond beta brainwaves and you move into alpha, you start opening the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Now, we're not just looking for any type of alpha, but we're looking for coherent alpha. So we want all those compartments that were firing in different rhythms and different frequencies, all of a sudden start doing this. So now the whole entire brain starts moving into what's called global coherence. Now, when the brain starts synchronizing like that, what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain, and the whole brain starts to fire as one neurological network, and that's what our data shows. Now, that's not the end. That's just when you're moving into an imaginary state, and people do this, but a lot of people move into alpha, but it's not coherent. So we're looking for coherent alpha. Now, many of the people that are meditating really well, they can relax their body so well, and they can feel so safe that their body moves into a light rest or a light sleep while they're still awake. So it's relaxed and awake. In that realm, you're in a hypnotic state. You're in theta brainwaves. And in theta now, lights are shut out in the thinking neocortex that plugs us into three-dimensional reality. The identity's gone. The character is gone. There's no activity there. Now the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open to information, and now we're suggestible to information. And now we're in the operating system. We can get in the subconscious mind and write a program. We could rehearse a new script. We can tell a new story. Instead of the story of the past, we could tell the story of our future, and we can program our subconscious mind and our autonomic nervous system to begin to change our biology. Now, go too far past theta and you fall into delta, and now lights are out. You're in a catatonic state and you're unconscious, right? Mm-hmm. And so we kind of do this when we go to bed at night. We go from beta to alpha, theta to delta. And if you're under stress and you're in high beta, you can't sleep. Mm. And you can't sleep because you're thinking, right? And you can't drop through brainwaves. We wake up in the morning and go from delta to theta to alpha to beta, right? So there's two times that the door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind opens up. Okay, what does this have to do with brain and heart coherence? Well, in theta, When a person is in that state where their attention is on their heart and energy is in their heart, it's natural for the heart to tell the brain to get creative. It's time to imagine. It's time to fall in love with a future. Now the heart is the creative center, right? It's the part of our biology that allows the brain to begin, the frontal lobe to begin to create. So you get the heart and the brain kind of working together. The more relaxed you get in your heart, the more awake you get in the brain, something beautiful happens in the brain. If the person can sustain this and they're in that theta state, theta becomes the carrier wave. And right within the brain, you start to see alpha waves building on theta waves, and then alpha waves in harmonics into beta waves, and harmonics into high beta, and then high beta ultimately into gamma. And now the person is relaxed and very awake because gamma is super consciousness. It is super awareness. So the formula of being relaxed and awake and synchronizing your heart to your brain causes the brain to move into a state of what's called resonance. And resonance is when you have waves on top of waves, harmonics. And the brain starts functioning in a more resonant state. Sometimes even people have delta as the base, carrying theta, and theta carrying alpha, and alpha carrying beta, to high beta to gamma. And they're all waves within waves. And as those waves come together, if they're coherent, they interfere and create a bigger wave. And then those waves come together and they interfere and they create bigger waves. And that's exactly how the energy in the brain goes up. So we have brain scans of people whose gamma brain waves are 200, 300, 400 standard deviations outside of normal. I'm going to give you an idea. 3 standard deviations outside of normal is 2% of the population. So they're processing an enormous amount of energy in their brain, and it feels really good. Really good. So we practice a lot synchronizing the heart to the brain.
If you do like MDMA or something, does that put you into some of these brainwaves? I'm wondering if any psychedelics are inducing of these states.
We're going to do a comparative study actually this year with psychedelics and meditation. I can answer that question more definitively. What we do know from fMRI studies with psilocybin is that the default mode network in the brain, the one I was talking about earlier, that's always the brain's predictor, that shuts off with psilocybin, and that's exactly what we see in our advanced meditators and our fMRIs. That those people that are having a mystical experience right in the MRI looks like they're taking psilocybin. The same exact brain circuits are turned off.
On this theta wave, you were talking about how that's really where a lot of the reprogramming can happen. So do I need to be in that state and then be exposed to some kind of stimulus sound?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Well, I'll answer it in 3 ways. First way is when you're conscious in your subconscious mind and you're trained to imagine whatever it is that you want, you're going to begin to signal your autonomic nervous system to start manufacturing chemicals equal to your intention. In other words, the intention of whatever you're thinking about acts as information that begins to change your biology. So theta is a great way to open up the door. We also use theta when we want to program people, because it's a hypnotic state, to a mystical experience. And if they're in that state, remember, when you're suggestible, you accept, believe, and surrender to information as if it's the truth without analyzing it. And that's what programs people's biology, right? So you can program somebody into believing they need a drug, and you can program somebody into believing in just about anything, but you could also program them for a mystical experience, and that's what we do. Now, so we can do that by giving them information when they're in that hypnotic state. They're very suggestible, but we're only going to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial to them. And then the third way is something that we really discovered that we weren't expecting. Let's see how I can say this and make it simple. There's particle and wave. There's matter and energy. And so if all of your attention is on this three-dimensional world, you're unaware of energy. So have a person close their eyes and take their attention off of everything physical, everything material, everything known, and go from a narrow focus to a broadened focus. And as they sense the space, they're actually putting their attention on that invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses, the quantum field, right? And that field is carrying an enormous amount of information. So when a person moves into theta, and I ask them to open their awareness, if they're in a certain range of theta, we can just about predict 100% of the time that that person is going to connect to information. Now, not information coming from their senses, like a hypnotist could put you in a trance in theta and give you suggestions and it could program you. But you're still in the same state, that hypnotic state, but your eyes are closed. There's music playing in the background. You're not eating, you're not tasting, you're not smelling, you're not feeling with your body, but you're still suggestible to information. There's only one other place you can find information, and that's frequency. And frequency carries information. So when a person starts to connect to energy, to frequency, and the thinking neocortex is dialed down, the moment they connect to that energy and frequency, the brain goes into these very, very high states of gamma brainwave patterns. They're connecting to a greater level of energy, a greater level of order, and the arousal that's felt when they have this connection, which is normally typically fear or anger or pain, the arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss. They say, I don't have the words to describe the feeling that I just had, right? So they're dipping closer to source. They're dipping closer to a greater energy and frequency, and it's being reflected in their biology. When we see people move into these elegant states of high gamma, it's primarily in their autonomic nervous system. It's very fast, and it's very coherent. Now, if stress is autonomic dysregulation, and they're functioning in a very, very high energetic state in their autonomic nervous system, coherent gamma brainwaves, then there's an enormous amount of autonomic regulation. And the autonomic nervous system controls and coordinates all other systems. Now watch out, because now the tuning fork is sending information to every cell and tissue and organ in the body. And when people move into these states, many times when they come back, they get a biological upgrade. Somehow energy starts to inform matter, and the whole body is lifted by light, lifted by frequency. When we draw the blood from people who have these kind of moments, we look for information in the blood. There's information in the blood that we've discovered that stops the COVID virus from entering the cell. We've isolated the protein that inhibits the virus from entering the cell. In other words, we've done these studies called adoptive transfers. We've taken advanced meditators' blood and we've put it in a culture with ACE2 receptors, cells that have ACE2 receptors, and then exposed the ACE2 receptor to a pseudovirus, like a COVID virus. And in advanced meditators, we noticed that the virus couldn't enter the cell. It was stuck to the outside of the cell, and we isolated a protein in the advanced meditator's blood that inhibits the virus from entering the cell. Those people that have those transcendental moments, as I said, 84% of them have information in their blood that causes the mitochondrial function and glycolytic function in cancer cells to shut off. There's information in the blood for neurogenesis, for the microbiome, completely changed at the end of 7 days, completely different microbiome, without changing their diet at all. They're still eating the same food, but they're not the same person, right? There's some kind of change that creates a lot of probiotic microbes.
I remember reading a study of Wim Hof, the Iceman, where they injected him with a virus. And I think they injected other people with the virus. And through his breath work and meditations and whatever else he did, the virus didn't infect him. But it infected the other people. And then I think in the study, he trained other people to be able to reject the virus as well. And all of this kind of sounds a little bit woo-woo to the average person, because to think that you can do something to prevent a virus infecting you, I mean, it blows the doors open to like personal responsibility and
yes, of course,
which is troubling for people, I think.
Yeah. Well, we published the paper. It got published in a scientific journal. People can see it online. Well, if you keep practicing being greater than your environment, you'll be greater than your environment. That's just how it is. In other words, if your response to your environment doesn't weaken you but strengthens you, then the innate intelligence of your body will have an intelligence that will cause you to be greater than your environment, right down to the microbe.